As we enter April 2026, we're witnessing yet another brutal war in the Middle East, this time one that has the imminent potential to bring the entire global economy to its knees. And unfortunately, I think we're about to see an escalation, one that'll make the effects of this conflict far more real for all of us. But we'll get into that a little later after we review last month's events and astrology. I don't like to brag about getting predictions right, especially when they're about events as destructive and depressing as the US-Israeli war on Iran, but I'm not averse to highlighting when the astrology does work, because this is a much maligned art, and part of my mission on this channel is just to show people that it really works. And the reason I want to do that is to help wake people up from the materialist spell that's been cast on most of us over the past couple of centuries. In other words, I want to show people that the world we're living in is not the world that the Epstein class says it is. With that said, then, I have to say that almost everything I forecast in March seems to have come to pass. First of all, the Iran war broke out on February the 28th with Mars squaring Uranus, a typically violent configuration. Here's what I said about that last month. At the end of February, Mars triggers the eclipse point and opposes Israel's natal Mars, and it will still be close to that point by the time of this Purim festival. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see conflict around the time of this blood moon eclipse. Now, a lot of people are claiming that this war has been a disaster for the US and Israel so far, and it seems that on some level that's true. Iran has proved itself a formidable enemy, one that's very much in tune with the astrological moment, because it's decentralized its military structure, which makes it very hard to beat, and that very much fits with the airy Aquarian nature of these times. Nevertheless, it seems likely to me that part of the US-Israeli strategy is really just to destabilize Iran to the point where it can't put up any resistance to Israeli dominance of the region going forward, and to help make the Greater Israel project a reality. Israel is, for example, taking over southern Lebanon as we speak. But there's another possible explanatory factor that I find compelling. And no, it's not that Iran was on the verge of getting nuclear weapons, as Netanyahu has been claiming for more than 30 years. It's that, from the US's perspective, this war is about seizing control of global energy supplies. The US itself is self-sufficient in natural gas, and indeed it's got surplus to sell its dependents, like today's Europe. On March the 18th, Israel attacked Iran's South Pars site, the largest natural gas field in the world. Iran responded with an attack on the Ras Laffan LNG plant in Qatar. Since then, there's been an explosion at an oil refinery in Port Arthur, Texas, and Ukraine is doing its part too, attacking Russia's largest oil port in the Baltic Sea at Primorsk. The result of all this has been a dramatic rise in the price of oil and gas, which will have a massive impact on the global economy going forward. And here, astrologically, I'm thinking about Saturn and Neptune, the planet of petrochemicals, in Aries. Aries is a martial fire sign, a sign of taking action in line with the will. Saturn can have a blocking or restraining effect. And it's starting to look to me like one of the themes of this Saturn in Aries transit could be limits to energy supplies, which then lead to limits and restrictions on free movement. Indeed, we're seeing reports that, to give just one example, Australia is running out of oil already. The forecaster Martin Armstrong has said that his economic forecasting computer program, Socrates, thinks oil prices could reach $225 to $235 a barrel by 2028. Those kinds of prices would have massive implications on all our lives and probably force a transition away from petrochemicals. 2028 is also the year when Saturn moves from Aries to Taurus, the sign of the harvest. People are already worried about the effects that massive oil price hikes could have on the food supply, because oil is needed to make fertilizers, and so some people are suggesting that global famine could be on the way. My guess, just thinking in terms of simple astrology, is that if there are going to be serious food supply issues and famine, they'll probably arise in 2028 when Saturn begins its transit through Taurus. Now, on March the 20th, the day of the Aries ingress this year, a symbolically potent moment, the International Energy Agency released a document called Sheltering from Oil Shocks, with a list of recommendations to governments. They include having populations work from home, cutting flights, lowering speed limits, and reducing the use of private cars. We're already seeing governments announcing some of these measures. And a lot of people are suggesting that this entire war is essentially leading to COVID 2.0, perhaps even by design. Because if governments really do implement all these measures, the effect will be to increase our dependence on digital technology, transfer wealth from small business to big business, especially tech companies, and fortify digital feudalism. It's been well known for some time that these kinds of movement restrictions are on the Great Reset agenda. And now, suddenly, a war and the resulting supply shock are providing the justification needed to implement them. Again, is this all part of the plan? Well, let's just say that it's not as if what's happening with the oil market was unforeseen. People have been saying for years that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz if it came under attack. Anyway, there is an astrological factor right now that lends a lot of weight to this idea, because Saturn and Pluto are in a sextile aspect, and they will be through May this year. This is the first major aspect of their cycle since their conjunction in January 2020, which brought the COVID pandemic and all the restrictions that came with it. Here's what I said about this in my March forecast. The sextile will take forward the themes that were established in the world during the cycle's seed period, i.e., the pandemic. Look out for governments introducing new laws or initiatives that take forward the impulses of that great 2020 power grab. Then think about the themes of biotechnology, corporate, state, and plutocratic empowerment, mass mind manipulation, and the restriction of basic human freedoms. If we see an upsurge in armed conflict, whether in the Middle East or in Ukraine or both or anywhere else, we might see the introduction of new structures of control that are supposedly necessary for national security. Another prediction that seems to have landed. Lo and behold, this is playing out. I think we're going to see more COVID-like measures being put in place during this sextile period from now until May. The good news, if there is some, is that a sextile is a relatively weak and harmonious aspect, so I doubt things are going to get as heavy as COVID, at least not yet. Anyway, back to the war. Even though it is, by all accounts, going badly for the US and Israel, Donald Trump has already declared victory many times. This too was forecast last month. Jupiter will be stationing direct, very close to the Sun of the United States Sibly chart, which is at 13 Cancer, and in a square to President Donald Trump's Jupiter. I think it's likely that we'll see Trump making grand statements around this time. Trump, grand statements? Surely some mistake. All right, I mean, even grander statements than usual. Perhaps he'll be trying to rally people around the flag or declaring victory or some kind of success. Jupiter stationed direct on March the 11th. On that very day, at a rally to supporters in Kentucky, Trump was saying this.
And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
And finally, last month I said that I felt a spiritual battle would really start to come into view this year, and particularly at the Equinox. We've already seen an omen that could reveal some of the contours of this spiritual battle. Because on March the 20th, which was actually the day of Eid, the feast at the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, what was claimed to be parts of an Iranian missile supposedly landed close to Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. If you think that's ominous, well, I agree with you. The equinox is the most symbolically potent moment of the year. Temporally, it represents a microcosm of the year to come. We'll talk more about this later in this video. That's enough looking back for now. Let's get into the forecast for April of 2026. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do click the like button and subscribe to the channel to show some support for this channel and make sure you don't miss future episodes. Thanks. And a quick announcement that I've opened up some new consultation slots. So if you'd like one, head to worldastrologyreport.com/consultations and make a booking. Thanks for listening. Onward. On April the 2nd, we'll see a full moon at 12 degrees of Libra. A Libra full moon will bring forth a contrast between the society and relationships that we're embedded in, Libra, and the urge to follow our own will and be independent, Aries. Saturn is in Aries right now, posing a challenge to all of us that has to do with being ourselves and being brave in the face of opposition or societal sanction. And that theme could come up, but the closest aspect to the moon in the chart for this full moon is a square from protective patrician Jupiter in Cancer, which is gaining power right now, having just stationed direct. Now, if we're considering this full moon from the perspective of personal astrology, the square from benefic Jupiter is, on balance, a good thing, I think. Expect to feel a strong sense of confidence deriving from our Cancerian sense of belonging, whether that's to a family or a country or a clan of some kind. The thing to be careful about with a square from exalted Jupiter is overconfidence or overextension aggression or even arrogance. So keep that in mind. It will be an easy time to alienate people who aren't part of your tribe. Now, this is a full moon in Venus's sign, and Venus is going to be spending most of April in its own sign of Taurus, which is also good news. Venus enters Taurus on March the 30th and will remain there until it leaves for Gemini on April the 24th. So we'll have benefic Venus in her own sign, and of course, benefic Jupiter is exalted and moving direct in Cancer, so both the life-giving planets will be strong in most of April. So as crazy as the world is right now, I'd suggest that Venus in Taurus might make April a good time to enjoy some of the pleasures of life while they're still available, and also to think about putting supplies away for what could be an uncertain future. Now, at a mundane level, the interesting thing here is that this full moon is very clearly speaking to events to come relating to Iran. The astro map is showing that when the lunation perfects, the sun and moon will be on the ascendant-descendant axis in Iran. That highlights that country in a very direct way. In fact, the lines of the astro map go right through the Strait of Hormuz, the key choke point for global trade that has been shut down as a result of the war. What's more, in the main chart I used for Iran, the sun is at 11 degrees of Aries, very close to the position of the sun in the full moon chart. So this full moon is going to signify an important moment in the Iran conflict. It could perhaps represent an agreement of some sort, Libra, relating to the Straits of Hormuz. And it may well have to do with China, which has a lot of planets in Libra. Perhaps China steps in as a mediator or somehow tries to break the deadlock and get trade flowing again. There could be visible attempts at securing a peace deal at this time. Although given the astrology coming later in the month, I doubt they'll hold. Another place that will be highlighted by this full moon is Greenland, because if we look at the astro map, we can see that the moon will be on the midheaven there when it goes exact. As we all know by now, Donald Trump has been trying to get control of Greenland as part of what people are calling the Donroe Doctrine, his new analogue of the Monroe Doctrine aimed at taking control of the Western Hemisphere. As we've seen, exalted Jupiter is squaring this full moon, and it's squaring Donald Trump's Jupiter. So look out for some kind of agreement or announcement from Trump, whether it's about Greenland or Iran at this time. All right, let's keep pushing forward. The main thing to know about April is that it's going to see a ton of Aries activation. And I think that unfortunately, that suggests that the pace and intensity of world events is going to increase, not decrease. At the Aries new moon on April the 17th, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune, as well as Eris and Chiron, will all be in that sign. That is a hell of a lot of Aries, the sign ruled by the war planet Mars. So it feels to me like there will be efforts by certain parties later in April to throw fuel on the geopolitical fire. But let's break this down. April starts with the Sun, Saturn, and Neptune in Aries. On April the 9th, Mars itself enters that sign which it rules by domicile. Mercury, the messenger, follows Mars into Aries on April the 15th. And then on April the 17th, we get that new moon in Aries. Now, on the one hand, it's kind of nice to see all this Aries activation after so much Piscean energy in recent months and years. I think we've all done enough navel-gazing and trauma analysis and musing about the tragedies and mysteries of reality to last us a good few years now. The shift into Aries signals that we've entered a dynamic time of action. Yes, it's time to actually be the change that we want to see in the world. But at a mundane level, let's be real, all this fiery Aries energy is pretty ominous given what's happening now. I suggest bracing yourselves for the chaos in the Middle East to expand rapidly and for all of us to start feeling the effects more directly. I think the period from about April the 8th to 12th looks particularly dangerous. At that time, Mars will be moving from the last degree of Pisces to the first degree of Aries, which is one of the four so-called world points. What happens there tends to have wide implications. What's more, Mars moving over the last degree of Pisces triggers the eclipse in the last degree of Virgo of September 2025. As I've said many times before on the channel, that eclipse looked to me like a signifier of financial crisis. What's more, Uranus is going to be in the final anaretic degree of Taurus for most of April. That's a very unstable place for it to be, and Uranus is an unstable planet. So I think this also signifies more turmoil and unpredictable events. And again, the period of roughly April the 8th to the 12th looks especially dangerous to me. Among the potential dangers we could foresee would be attacks or accidents involving nuclear technology. It bears repeating that this whole war is being fought under the obviously spurious pretext of preventing Iran from getting nukes, which Israel already has, of course. You only have to note that Netanyahu has been saying that Iran is just months from getting a nuclear weapon for more than 30 years now. Worryingly, this past week, Israel and Iran have exchanged attacks that have landed perilously close to nuclear sites. Israel attacked the Natanz uranium enrichment facility in Iran, and Iran responded by sending a missile close to Dimona, the center of Israel's own nuclear program. Unfortunately, there are astrological factors suggesting that we're right in the danger zone for possible nuclear accidents. Are we about to see an Israeli mistake? In the bonus section of this video, available for members of the channel, whether here on YouTube or at worldastrologyreport.com, we dig into those factors. Now, on April the 17th, we'll see a new moon at 27 degrees of Aries. That new moon will energize all the Aries planets, so it looks like a major moment of action and initiation. What's more, the new moon is going to be close to the ongoing conjunction of Eris and Chiron. These are two important celestial bodies that I don't tend to talk too much about on the channel. Eris is a dwarf planet with a 560-year cycle. It's named for the goddess of discord. Chiron is the wounded healer archetype. It has a 50-year cycle and it tends to signify wounds, whether literal or psychic. With Eris conjunct Chiron right now, it seems to me that the conflict in Iran and things like the Epstein files and various other happenings are opening up the world's major psychic wounds. The wounds that divide us. These wounds take us all the way back to the 1940s, a period that all three of the outer planets, Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, are now in cyclical resonance with. This could, of course, be a video of its own, but we need to keep moving and talk about the cornerstone of April's astrology, the conjunction of Mars and Saturn at 7 degrees of Aries. On April the 19th, Mars and Saturn will meet at 7 degrees and 51 minutes of Aries, something that happens every 2 years. Mars and Saturn are a high pressure, frustrating, and often explosive combination of planets. Since both Mars and Saturn are at odds with each other, Mars wants to move quickly, Saturn wants restraint. Mars-Saturn conjunctions are the crucible in which fresh episodes of sustained challenge are forged, which the world then needs to reckon with over the 2 years that follow as the synodic cycle unfolds. This conjunction is happening in Aries, the sign ruled by Mars, and in which Saturn is in full. This suggests to me that Mars will have the edge here. So while Saturn is a restraining influence, I don't think there's much chance that it'll be able to hold the warrior back. I'm not sure there's much chance of this war ending as soon as some people are hoping. But there's a lot more going on with this conjunction, because Mars and Saturn will actually form a very tight triple conjunction with the messenger planet Mercury. This suggests to me that this conjunction could bring serious problems with trade or markets or communications technology or all of the above. It could well be that the 2-year cycle that's beginning now will in part relate to the oil and energy crisis that seems to be stirring now, of course. But if we look again at the planets in the lineup, you'll see that Neptune is also present. Neptune is the planet of illusion and delusion. And here I want to issue something of a warning. I think this astrology could absolutely be signaling the possibility of provocative attacks that bring more countries into this war. And the nature of such attacks could be fundamentally illusory. It could be something that's dressed up as one thing while actually being another. Yes, a false flag attack of some kind is very much possible. People who are paying close attention have noted that a number of attacks that have been blamed on Iran in this conflict have some somewhat fishy aspects to them. For example, we have the supposed Iranian drone attack on a British base in Cyprus, which the British Ministry of Defense announced was not launched from Iran. And we also have the supposed Iranian missile attack on Diego Garcia. The Secretary General of NATO himself, Mark Rutte, for example, has said that NATO cannot confirm that Iran attacked Diego Garcia with one of its missiles, as is being claimed by Israel. And this attack has been used by Israel and by mainstream European media to claim that European cities are under threat of Iranian attack. And you have to ask yourself, why would Iran want to draw more countries into war against it when it's already under attack? It doesn't make any sense. The question, cui bono, who benefits, is our friend here. Something I noticed when preparing my year ahead forecast is that the Mars-Saturn conjunction of April is directly hitting a lot of mundane charts, including that of NATO, the UK, France, Germany, India, China, Taiwan. This could be signaling multiple different events that affect these various countries in different ways. Or it could be one big one. I don't know, honestly. It could be that something incredibly serious happens that prompts a global response from all these different places. And that thing could have to do with nuclear technology, as I said earlier. And here I want to raise one more possibility, a disturbing one, but one that I think people at least need to be aware of. If you've watched this this channel for a while, you'll be aware of the batshit crazy plans by certain parties to try to build the third temple on the site of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, currently the site of the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Wailing Wall. This is not a so-called conspiracy theory. It's very real. Here's US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth speaking on this very subject.
And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible.
And here are patches that are appearing on a growing number of IDF soldiers' uniforms. Now, I suspect that some of you will be deep in the cold, cold ground before you consent to watching a Tucker Carlson video. But Tucker is clearly on some kind of journey right now, and there's one recent video of his that I think is a must watch. It's this one, released in February. And to summarize, Tucker suggests the possibility that this war could provide the pretext needed to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and build that third temple. Because it would be very, very easy for a quote-unquote Iranian missile to hit the mosque. And then, there you go, the site is clear. And it was supposedly the Iranians' fault, and then construction of the third temple can get underway. The mosque is the third holiest site in Islam. Of course, you'd have to ask why on earth the Islamic State of Iran would want to damage that site. Again, cui bono. Could the destruction of that site lead to a global holy war? Well, you could certainly imagine that some of the demons who aspire to rule the world think so. And here's the disturbing thing. Since the Iran war broke out, Israel has closed both the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Old City of Jerusalem. This is basically unprecedented. And people are suggesting that closing those sites would remove the possibility of there being any direct witnesses to any kind of misfortune that could befall those sites. I know, it all sounds crazy. But as I've said before, these are crazy times. And if your understanding of what's happening doesn't sound crazy, I don't think you're engaging with reality right now. Now, in my last forecast video, I said that the Aries ingress of March the 20th of this year seemed to promise a spiritual battle getting underway. And guess what? On that very day, fragments of a intercepted Iranian missile supposedly fell and exploded close to the old city of Jerusalem, apparently just 400 feet from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I find it ominous that that happened at the time of the spring equinox, the Aries ingress. Events that happen at the start of cycles tend to foreshadow things that actually happen during the cycle and begins at that time. And what's more, Benjamin Netanyahu himself is warning that such a thing could happen.
The second thing that they did is that they fired on Jerusalem right next to the holy places. They sent ballistic missiles that could have destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Western Wall.
Again, I very much hope that none of this happens and it all ends up looking like schizoid ranting in retrospect. Of course, it could be that enough awareness has been raised by things like that Tucker Carlson video to force the abandonment of this plan if it genuinely exists. But unfortunately, events keep confirming that the craziest possible outcome is the one we're heading towards. And the astrology of April looks extremely combustible. And so if something like this does happen, bear in mind what I've said here and ask yourself once again that question, cui bono? All right, let's move on, because as if all that wasn't enough, we also have a major outer planet shift coming in April. On April the 26th, Uranus makes its final entrance into Gemini, a transit that will last until 2033. This is an important milestone because it marks the last of all the outer planet sign ingresses that have been shaping the dynamics of the current moment in the past couple of years. Pluto is in Aquarius, Saturn and Neptune are in Aries, not to return to Pisces, and Uranus will be firmly in its Gemini era. Uranus is the awakener. It connects us to the higher self in jolting moments of disruption and realization. It puts us in touch with the unique genius that each of us possess. And so Uranus in the curious mercurial air sign of Gemini promises all a wild intellectual ride, which I think is quite clearly already underway. It promises great innovation in the areas of computing and communications and transport and trade, but also just in our ideas about the world. I think it's going to blow our minds, honestly, as if they needed more blowing than they've already been subjected to in 2026. One of the things that I think Uranus's sign change is going to do is shift the energy of disruption towards the east, because Uranus is moving from the already war-torn Taurus geodetic zone of the world, which is this one, into the Gemini zone, which is this one, and contains South Asia, including India, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Unfortunately, I think there's strong risk of conflict breaking out in this zone between now and 2033. Indeed, we've already started to see signs that this is what's coming. India and Pakistan fought a very short conflict last year, and this year Pakistan and Afghanistan have also started fighting. Of course, something most people who are into astrology know by now is that Uranus's Gemini transits have historically coincided with the US being in major wars, existential wars even. Previous Uranus and Gemini transits saw the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and then World War II. Another way of putting this is that Uranus and Gemini has brought the crises that end the fourth turnings of Strauss-Howe generational theory, something I talked about with Adam Sommer in this video. It seems pretty clear that that fourth turning crisis is here now. But what's the theme? Well, I think it's actually pretty clear if we're honest enough to reckon with it. Because what do the release of the Epstein files and the Iran war have in common? Both of them have to do with the influence of the state of Israel on the world, the Zionist project and its implications, which, let's face it, is taking the whole world to the brink right now. And that may well even be by design. And I think that all this gets to the core of what this spiritual battle we're entering now concerns. Ultimately, this is a battle between darkness and light, between lies and truth, between human fellowship and the ideology of domination. Today, Gaza, Lebanon, Iran. Tomorrow, everywhere else. I will just make one more remark. I've talked a lot on this channel about the totalizing digital control grid that's being built right now. I've also talked about how Jeffrey Epstein was working towards this goal, as revealed by the Epstein files. When you have a project that can only be made to make sense when your fundamental assumptions are lies, what do? Well, you have to seize total control of people's abilities to speak, to learn, and to know the truth. Enter the digital control grid. Everything is connected. To be clear about something, this is not about pointing a finger at any particular ethnicity or group of people. It's not about pointing horizontally. What it's about is looking up towards the Epstein class. It's about looking up at the networks of power for whom what's been going on in the Middle East for a long time now is a means to an end, and one that's having a corrupting influence on all of us, Jew and Gentile alike. So I think that, unfortunately, we're all going to have to make a big choice soon. It's a choice between the Epstein class's vision of the world, one of dominance, materialism, and transhumanism, and something humane. Uranus in Gemini is going to be about making that choice and facing its consequences. This is a great initiation for humanity, and we either pass or fail the test, and we're all taking part. That's it for this video. In the bonus section for members of World Astrology Report, we're going to look at some of the signals pointing to the potential for accidents and attacks related to nuclear technology this month. Thanks for watching, and see you again on the channel very soon.